GrowCFO is where finance leaders grow together. Join thousands of like-minded professionals using GrowCFO to access the combined knowledge and experience of the finance leader community. You can join us today at growcfo.net. Hello and welcome to the GrowCFO show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and today I've got Catherine Clark with me again. Now, Catherine, you've been doing some work on soft skills recently.
Yeah, hi Kevin. Yeah, nice to be back on the podcast with you. Yes, I have, because I just believe that soft skills are highly important to being a leader. They're the qualities that really make that leadership successful, in my opinion. So yes, I believe it's a really important area we're discussing this morning.
So, soft skills, that sounds like a very, very broad area. What would you say soft skills are?
Yeah, so I mean, soft skills are they're the human skills, really. The human skills that we use in, teamwork, leadership, collaboration, communication, creativity, and just in dealing with people. So soft skills are the part that aren't hard skills, and are sometimes known as the sort of emotionally intelligent skills that a person has, particularly in dealing with people.
Emotionally intelligent. That sounds like a tough one for me. I've got to become emotionally intelligent. Oh, yeah. So,
Well, that's how we tune in to the emotional side of us, us as humans.
so where do we start in trying to learn more about soft skills, Catherine? This sounds like you can't just pick up a book and read about it. It sounds as though it's a more complicated process than that.
Well, I would say if they don't come naturally, and to many people they do come quite naturally. However, you can either enhance what you have naturally or learn soft skills. But it is something that needs to be learned if they don't come to you naturally. The reason I say that is there is some evidence to suggest that 80% of your achievement in your career will be down to your soft skills, not your hard skills.
Yeah, I definitely get that. Yeah.
So our hard skills we learn, particularly as accountants, we've learned it through all of our qualifications and, the technical ability that we have. And that is seen as a given, really, in many of the roles that we, take on as we get more senior. It's the soft skills that become the sort of binding part, taking those more hard and technical skills into the real world and dealing with people and actually becoming a leader.
This is about persuading people. It's about getting people to follow you, getting people enthused about things and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, the hard skills, great. But as a CFO, find the stuff you learned to become an accountant, to get to where you are. There's an awful lot of stuff these days that's technical, and you can learn how to do it by a decent amount of time spent on Google or reading a book. But yeah, taking that practical knowledge and turning it into something you can take a team with you. And I always say the biggest part of change is about people and changing people's opinions and communicating and so on. So I guess soft skills, a large amount of it comes down to how you communicate and what you communicate.
Yes, and I think it starts with the point that you can have a lot of knowledge, but unless you can articulate that knowledge, in a very clear sort of form, it doesn't have as much impact. So yes, I mean, communication is one of the key ones. And the reason communication, well, certainly in my opinion, is probably the most important one is, we're now in a world, not just currently, but more generally, I guess, where there's a lot happening. One of the key problems that people come across or feel is overwhelmed at the moment. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, you need that clarity to come through. And you either as a leader or in receiving it need to have that clarity. And that comes a lot from clear communication. And so enabling that sort of transparency in the environment, sort of sharing the bigger picture, sharing the purpose, sharing the vision of an organization, and making it clear where everyone plays their part. So that for me is the beginning part of communication. It's how you actually enable people to see what they've got to do to contribute in their organisation. It then goes beyond that, because as a leader, your gravitas or your presence and how you show up is what people can take comfort from. So, particularly, let's be honest, particularly as a CFO, you're the one looking after the business or the financial side of the business. How you show up and how you present yourself is going to show people how safe the company is, and therefore how safe they can feel within it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking back to a podcast we did 3 or 4 weeks ago with Patrick Dunn, and we were talking a lot in there about the CFO and his role with the board. And the CFO has to be the guy that shows up and gives the other board members an awful lot of confidence in what is going on. He plays a very, or he or she plays a very key role between the board and the CEO, giving that kind of grounding, that kind of reality, practicality, and he's got to show up and be the CFO's got to be the best version of the CFO when showing up. Absolutely vital.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I did a workshop the other week on soft skills, and, I was asking people what qualities they admire the most in others. And this fits into that. But one of the key things that came through was a leader or a CFO looking calm and in control.
Mm-hmm.
They were sort of really the words that were used. And particularly when you're dealing with a crisis or with change more generally, and let's be honest, change is the only constant, then those two factors are vital. And because your body language actually is the primary form of communication, it's 55% of how you communicate comes through in body language.
Yeah.
Words are only 7%, and tone of voice is the middle part. I think it's 38%. But you've got to be able to communicate through your body language as much as through your words.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that business change piece, and as a management consultant with my other hat on, I get involved in a lot of business change projects, and I always think that 90% of change does come down to communication. And we often say, you communicate again. When you think you've communicated enough, you haven't. Communicate again. Use every possible channel you can to communicate. And most of all, make sure that you're telling it right from the top of the organization. So you'd want the CEO, the CFO, the head of department, whoever the bigwig is, to be telling people that this change is right, this change is going to happen, this is why it's going to happen, this is where we're going. And if you don't have that focus from the top of the organization, people don't buy in.
No, they don't. And I think it's something that people forget, that it's easy being at the top, actually, in that group where you sort of know everything that's happening. But put yourself in the position of someone in the organisation who doesn't have access to that same information. You have to communicate it. You can't assume people know. They can't just mind read. So you have to have a continual communication to engage those people.
Yeah.
And to reassure them and to motivate them and all of the good things. But, it's as much about motivating for them to sort of work with you to develop and sort of achieve that vision more than anything else, really.
Yeah, and communications is a two-way process. It's not just you telling them how it is. It's opening up a dialogue so that you get the feedback. Fine saying we're going to do X, Y, and Z when Fred down on the shop floor knows that, well, that won't work because, well, you want Fred on the shop floor to tell you that won't work because he goes, yeah, he's got a serious point there.
Well, let's be honest. This is, for me, I think one of the biggest things that you can do when you're communicating is listen.
Yeah.
That for me is probably one of the most critical skills, because people feeling heard and seen does so much for their own feeling of worthiness in an organisation. And not enough people, I think, listen actively. And that is one of the most important skills in communicating. As I said, it's about listening to other people's views, listening to what they think. And there's a little technique actually I was sharing with one of my mentees the other day, which is around authentic relating. It's only a small thing I'm going to share, but it's almost an exercise where you do actively and consciously listen to someone for a couple of minutes and almost replay back to them what you've heard.
Yeah.
Even if that doesn't happen in practice, if your mind is saying, what happens if someone asks me in 2 minutes' time what I've been listening to? It's a very good tip for thinking, am I listening properly?
And I remember years ago doing a process consulting course with Coopers and Lybrand, probably the best piece of training I've ever been on. We spent an entire week on this course, and literally that week was communicating, but it was communicating generally on a one-to-one basis. So you were learning how to actively listen, and how not just actively listen, but ask the right questions to get more information. So what you've just said there about listening and playing back, absolutely. But we were taught to listen and know how to ask the open question against one of the hooks that you just heard, which might be, oh, tell me some more about that, or oh, why do you think that is? And then that play back probably came 3 or 4 questions down the road where you'd say, so okay, so I've been listening to what you've been saying. I think, can I just check that it's this and this? And that in itself might get the other person to say, yes, that's right. Oh, and there's that I forgot to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way as well. I think as long as you're not formulating the question while you're still listening.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're thinking again about what am I going to ask next, but not am I consciously listening to the other person.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Getting the
Absolutely.
balance right.
And the other tendency in that sort of conversation is to jump into solution mode.
Yeah.
That somebody tells you whatever, and you think, oh, have you tried? No, don't say that. You can ask them more about the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And rather than jumping into a solution, maybe you could do a little bit of storytelling about where else you've seen something similar and explore whether it's like that or whether it's different from that. So, yeah.
That's right, yeah. But certainly, I mean, listening, particularly, I mean, it makes people feel recognised,
Yeah,
valued, and this is why I also make a connection to sort of, just well-being in an environment, because the more you do that, the more worthy people feel and the more recognised they feel. And that has a direct impact on how they perform and how they operate.
absolutely.
People actually care. So,
yeah. Now, Catherine, just observing ourselves here communicating. You were explaining things and you went into a story about a conversation with a mentor. I was listening and hearing what you were saying, thinking about that exercise you did, and then I gave a story about what happened on a course. Storytelling, that is a huge part of communication.
Yeah, it is.
Why is it so powerful?
Well, I think it brings it moves it from the slightly more general sort of concepts into something real.
Yeah.
And it's something that people can relate to. So in fact, in an ideal world, we'd all be using storytelling a lot more, because it really brings to life the narrative of what you're saying and why. And you mentioned the word hook earlier, but it's about someone being able to tune in to why that is important. And people absorb information in different ways. I mean, that's also part of communicating the storytelling. Who is your audience, and what are they going to take away from this exchange?
Yeah.
So, at the heart of storytelling is who is the audience, and what information do they need?
Yeah. I think there's something, people remember stories, and people relate to stories. You hear a story because it's about a specific situation. There's kind of a mental trigger going on and say, oh, I remember a situation like that. And you automatically get people relating to what you're talking about.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think those relevant stories are hugely powerful. I mean, I did an online conference recently with a couple, and in fact, they were primarily focused on the stories of the speakers.
Yeah.
So they were obviously geared and themed towards what the theme was about, and that's important. It's got to be relevant storytelling. Otherwise, we'd all go off at tangents. Sort of,
Yeah.
it'll all be about us rather than actually the audience. You've got to get that balance right. But it was extremely powerful. Yeah, putting their stories forward, and for me as well, it showed a vulnerability, and vulnerability creates connection. There's a beautiful sort of TED talk by Brené Brown on, I think it's called The Art of Vulnerability. But it's around showing that bit of vulnerability and showing, people that you've also got a story and you may have also, had this particular thing going on is part of that connection.
Yeah. And I think people generally relate to others that they know a little bit more about.
Yeah.
If you make yourself that little bit vulnerable, people will connect with that. People will feel they know you better, and people will be keener to work with you.
And I don't know about you, but I think that for me is growing, as the years pass by. I think there was a time when that wasn't welcomed almost. It wasn't almost the thing to do, to be more vulnerable and open. I love the situation now that we're all in each other's living rooms or spare bedrooms, in terms of on Zoom, because it seems to have opened up something that wasn't there before.
Yeah, I was talking to Russell Thackeray a couple of weeks ago on the podcast about exactly that. That there's one organisation he's working with that the team almost know the kids of the team members as well as the team members themselves, because they're showing up on video calls all the time, and it's welcomed rather than frowned upon.
Exactly, and I think when I look back over the years, we all slightly had an attitude of let's just get on with things, and things may have been going well in personal lives that we didn't bring into work. It was sort of all kept away, but I do think it's important to get to know people better.
Yeah,
because you have far more understanding then of where each person is at. And given leadership or management is around managing individuals, not a group, everyone is different. You've got to understand each of those people to be able to do the best job you can and to support them in their journey.
I think that's absolutely spot on, Catherine. And so soft skills, we've talked a fair bit there about communication. Now, just talking about it on a podcast, we're just sort of touching the surface. How would you, if you want to go deeper into this subject, how would you go about doing it?
Well, there are, even at GrowCFO, we're running a session on soft skills, which goes a little bit deeper across different parts of the soft skills. But really, it does start with yourself. So, you've got to do a bit of self-reflection here. And given how important we said soft skills were at the beginning, they can make or break your career. You've got to acknowledge their importance. I think secondly, do quite a lot of self-reflection. How good am I at this? Really, how good am I at it? Not just, I think I'm okay at that. You've got to be heading towards excellent across a number of soft skills. So a really good sort of self-reflection, some inner work on what do I need to work on. Now, secondly to that, I think it's about observing others. So look around you. I use the word observation quite a lot, but look around you. Who do you admire? What qualities do you admire in others? Who's performing in a way that actually is a really good role model and you can emulate in some way? Equally, who is not operating as a good role model, who is not showing good qualities in maybe leadership or management, and where would you be different in that? because we want to make sure that people don't become a carbon copy of someone else, but you
Yeah.
can observe and watch the traits of others. And then it's about practicing. And, at the end of the day, a good soft skill is a bit like a habit, and it takes
Yes.
practice.
A lot of practice.
A lot of practice.
Yeah, and I'm going back to that Coopers and Lybrand course. What they taught us was actually very simple. And I could tell you what it is in 10 minutes, but it was the week practicing it. And that course did have a notorious reputation because you were talking and not really talking work things. You were probing lots of personal stuff. But it was the course that had the reputation for lots of people resigning because they realized they were doing the wrong job or wanted to go and do something different. Or they found out the meaning of life during the 5 days on the course.
Yeah, it's I had to say, that you have a choice. I believe you have a choice. It's, most of the people that we're working with are heading towards some form of leadership position.
Yeah.
And you can choose to lead as people have done in the past, or from a position of not having the best soft skills, or you can make a conscious and active choice to be the best leader you can be. And if I was to define that, then it's about leading with compassion. It's leading in a clear but direct way. We're not talking like soft as in soft. We're talking about understanding the impact of your behaviour on others.
Yeah. So, Catherine, I know you're a great mentor. So where does the role of as a mentor fit into developing somebody else's soft skills?
Well, again, it always starts with self-awareness. So, I always work on a very personalised level with people. So, it's not some kind of general, you need to get better at this, you need to get better at that. It's about taking particular scenarios or situations that someone is currently in and supporting them through that. And understanding, what leader they wish to become, and looking at where possibly their gaps are at the moment to actually feeling successful in that position. And some people are very, very observant in that they can sort of see that they are missing some of the parts that will allow them to lead in the way they wish to lead in. So that could be connected with maybe confidence or self-esteem. Or it could be not feeling they have the right level of influence within a team or within a sort of peer group. So it's about taking particular scenarios and just working through it, and also identifying what obstacles, maybe past beliefs that are actually sticking, they become a sticking point to you getting through to that leadership position and feeling successful.
And I can definitely see the role of a mentor in this area. And for certainly for me personally, I'm probably the last person to realize in the soft skills area what my own shortcomings are. Therefore, having somebody else that can point that out, that can help me through things, that we can bounce off how do you handle this particular situation, would be incredibly useful. I think hard skills, as I said earlier, you can Google a lot of stuff, you can read it in the textbook. Soft skills are so much more difficult than that. And I think having that mentor-mentee relationship is something that's really worthwhile if you want to get this area sorted out.
When I choose to work with someone, I become their biggest supporter. The goal I have for them is for them to reach whatever potential they want to reach. That's why I work. That's why I do it.
Yeah.
So what comes with that is a degree of honesty, an honesty in I'm not just going to sit back and just say yes to everything. It's more about, this is to move someone forward from where they are now to a future point that they wish to be in. So, I do take a very sort of open and honest approach to that. And I will give feedback on that basis, because this is about moving forwards.
Yeah.
And not everyone is honest. People get a lot of good feedback, but then they don't feel successful. The two don't quite go hand in hand.
Yeah, and When you're in that CFO role, it is to some extent a lonely place. And we're talking tricky things like business change.
Mm.
There is no one right way to do things. There are always a bunch of alternatives, like, oh, what would happen if I went down this path? Would people follow me? Or would they follow me better if I went down this other path? Having that mentor relationship where you can look at this sort of one step removed from the organization with experience of having done it somewhere before, I can see that being really powerful in helping the CFO think through the alternatives and the what ifs before making a decision.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, again, where sort of mentoring comes in, to find that sort of clarity or rational thinking when you're dealing with, for example, a big business change project, but any kind of change, that the best thing you can do for yourself is to have the clearest mind possible.
Yes.
And, that starts from a position of, being in a calm place. So, there might be a lot going on. We know the classic problems at the moment. People are really busy. It's very hard to focus when you're that busy. You might feel quite stressed and overwhelmed. So really, as a starting point, it's about looking at, where people are focusing their attention, how you get out of that slightly fight or flight mindset, because that really, really narrows your focus. So it's about, bringing in, even things around well-being to ensure that people have a very clear head, because that's where it starts from. Leadership, in a way, starts from yourself and getting yourself in the best place and in the calmest mindset to give that clarity to others.
Yeah.
And then you can lead, with that clearness, with that direction. You can set clear goals, and then it becomes a very collective team effort to come together and achieve together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one thing that'd be interesting to explore, I know we're drawing towards the close of this particular conversation, Catherine, but the thing that's just gone through my mind at the moment is kind of communicating with the team and then handling objections. Now, I'm just thinking about personal experience. I remember we were doing a zero-based budgeting session on a pair of coal-fired power stations that were next to each other. And we were doing lots of communication sessions with the budget holders on both of the stations. Station A, we got a lot of nodding heads and agreeing and sage, wise looks to think, yeah, okay, we understand what you want and all the rest of it. Then we went to Station B and we got a whole load of pushback. Oh, we can't do this at the moment. We're in the middle of doing this big shutdown of the station for maintenance. We've got to have the station back up at the given date. You're asking us to do this during all of these other deadlines. Oh, look, there's all this uncertainty over here because we're upgrading this unit and we can't possibly work out a zero-based budget for that because we've got nothing to base the costs on. And that felt really uncomfortable. And there was a bit of tension in the room. But in actual fact, what we discovered 3 or 4 weeks later, when we were actually looking for these people to deliver on the budgets. Now, the problems on each station turned out to be the same. They all had the same pressures, the same things getting in the way. Station A, that had told us it was all nice and easy, or really didn't give us any feedback at all, and we had the comfortable conversation with, were the ones we're now having the difficult conversation with as to, well, we asked you for this 4 weeks ago, where is it? Whereas Station B, we were having the, oh, thank you very much for managing to balance everything and get us what we wanted. The objections felt uncomfortable, but the objections were coming out because they'd actually listened and they were working through the problems of doing what we'd asked for.
But the thing is with that, if you can get yourself in a place of calmness, you then, if you've got objections, if you've got different opinions coming back, you'll be in a much better place to listen and absorb if you're already in a calm place, in a non-reactive state.
Yeah.
And then, that's when you start to see potentially the strengths also in someone else's argument.
Yeah.
Communication is definitely two-way. If we shut ourselves off to not hearing others' viewpoints as well, we're not getting a full picture.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Not necessarily going to come together for the right result.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think having that little amount of challenge, that little amount of tension there actually says you are communicating in the right way. So don't necessarily think that you're doing a bad job if you're getting that feedback. If you're not getting that feedback, I'd be worried.
And it all connects through to, at the end of the day, you have to think, what behaviours do you value for yourself? And therefore, what behaviours actually really make you the most productive, make you work at your best, and therefore replicating those behaviours for others.
Yeah.
Bad behaviours, in my view, have become too normalised in some environments. And yes, people work because they have to, and because you make them, but that is not the same as people working because they want to. And a slightly more happy environment actually generates more motivation and productivity, which, let's be honest, we're talking in the finance world here, does generate more financial value and outcome.
Well, you hope it does.
I believe it does.
Catherine, that has been fascinating. I know we've literally just scraped the surface on soft skills, and there's a stack more in the Learning Centre in GrowCFO. There are a lot of modules that you can delve into if you want to find out more in detail about. We've only touched communication. That's only one of a whole series of soft skills you can go and find out more about. And Catherine is available through GrowCFO as a mentor, if that's something that the conversation this morning's tempted you into. Come along to GrowCFO, and there's places within GrowCFO that you can get in touch with Catherine and have a more detailed conversation about what that might be about. So, Catherine, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much.